Coming to you from a portable microphone, this is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Darn it, I know I always forget stuff. I meant to go look and see how long it's been since I recorded one of these conversations, and it has been months. It has been, people, there's stuff going on behind the scenes you have no idea about. We do things in a timeline that looks like it's just like a clock. Every 2 weeks, bunk, 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 bunk. Every 2 weeks you're getting one of these, free of charge, by the way, I might add, so stop complaining about it. Every 2 weeks for 10 and a half years, I've been serving these, but I sometimes don't record them. I record them in batches. Sometimes I don't record them at all for a long, long time. But I am back in the way too hot library at the Creative Circus. I don't understand why. It feels like it's about 85 degrees in here. Isn't it warm in here? Guests, they're nodding. They're both nodding. It's a little warm. It's either warm or it's really, really cold in here. So welcome back. And this is going to be interesting. We're talking with MRY. And I'm curious, raise your hands if you've heard of MRY. How many of you had heard of MRY before this? Okay, I'm counting like 300. That's not bad. 300 or 400 people have heard of it. So that's cool. I did not know much about it till I visited in May, and I got a sense of a place that feels very much like it was reported in Forum today. Very familial and comfortable. It feels like everybody is happy to be there, happy to see each other. It's a space that is not a wonderful space architecturally, I'll say that, but it is a wonderful space if you believe in things like the vibe. It's got a very, very nice vibe to it. But that's just my 2 cents. So we're talking today with Elizabeth Cauvel, who's a creative director. This is officially Elizabeth's 4th time on the podcast, and with her 4th job title at her 4th agency, which is pretty interesting. And she's like, really? She's still wondering if that's actually for real. She graduated from the Creative Circus back in the year of 2006. She went to Chicago, where she was a copywriter at Energy BBDO, then a copywriter at Digitas. I think those are 2 of the times that we talked last. I think you've been on this podcast each of these jobs. Once when you were at Energy BBDO, once from Digitas, once with your partner Janine when you were at McGarry Bowen, working primarily on Verizon, and now a creative director at MRY, working, I want to say, mostly on Hulu, although that's segued out of a bunch of other stuff because she has been at MRY now for 3 years and a number of months. And she went to University of Georgia, and she went to the Creative Circus, as I said. Sitting with us today, as you see on the description, is Carrie Cervati. She is the Director of Resource Management / Talent at MRY, which means she's the one that gets jobs. She manages the personnel there. She has been there for, I think she said 5 years, since March of 2012. Very cool. Thank you guys for being here. Welcome back, Elizabeth, and Carrie, welcome to the microphone in the Creative Circus.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, how was today different than your other visits have been so far?
Today was the first day when I felt markedly different from the students. Like the past, I mean...
Oh, I don't think I know what you mean.
The past few times I've done this, you come and you always kind of feel like, hey, I'm just like you. I've only been out of school for a couple of years. Or, oh, hey, I've only been out of school for 5 years. And today it's like...
11 years.
Wow, 11. I've been working for 11 years. I'm a creative director. That's the goal that I always wanted to reach. And it just feels... I felt older than the students, which I am.
It's kind of... I think... Officially, I think a generation is considered 30 years. Like when you look at basically a human generation is 30 years. But I think in advertising, I think a generation is somewhere right about where you are. Somewhere between 11 and 13 years where you're kind of looking at slightly different mannerisms, cultural references. Honestly, I'm very curious to learn about linguistic cadence and different sort of verbal rhythms that the younger generation has. And you start to notice that difference right about now. Was that off-putting for you? Is it exciting? Is it weird?
No.
And you're also treated with a bit of reverence, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's very weird. Like when people look at you and they're like, "Oh, you're a creative director," because inside I'm just as dumb as I've always been. But to them, I'm the goal. Like it's very strange to be that. Like to put it in perspective, I joined Facebook. I signed up for Facebook when I was at the Creative Circus. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's crazy. Like the people who are sitting that were sitting in forum today
signed up
have been on Facebook
at the same, that just as long, although
just
they were
as
children.
long, but they were like in middle school,
Right.
I mean, that's crazy.
Right. Welcome
Thank you. Welcome to adulthood.
Welcome to fucking reality. God damn, sucks. So, Carrie, what are your impressions of the school and your day so far? So these guys, just listeners, so you know, they came in. Well, Elizabeth was here early, looking at portfolios. Carrie came in a little after a meeting at Moxie, right?
Yep.
Looking at books in the tent, which was probably equally hot. It's really
equally
warm,
hot, yes.
Really warm in there.
Really warm all around.
So, what are your impressions so far, and how's your day been?
Today's great. Woke up a little too early, but so I think that this place is amazing. I love like the culture and the vibe here. The students are great. They seem like really eager. They asked a lot of questions. I was anticipating like 20 people to be here, and it seemed like there was 200. So that made me a little nervous, but yeah.
Were they asking questions? Like, I'm curious about the 8th quarter students that were presenting to you guys. Did they ask you questions then? I'm assuming they were doing a lot of listening and nodding, but They
took notes and asked a lot of questions.
They did. They asked really smart questions. They did a great job of presenting their work. I was really pleasantly surprised how well spoken they all were, and I really took note of every single person took time to say, really appreciate you being here. And I just thought that's like really nice. I wonder if I ever said that to the people that looked at my book. I don't know if I ever said that, and I hope I did, but they were just appreciative and did great jobs, and I think it's a really great quarter.
I think that's important, not to take any of that stuff for granted. So I had a meeting. I guess I can name it. I try to have this policy on the podcast where I'll name names if it's positive.
Yeah.
So I had a student ask for some time. We sat and talked about some different options and career stuff. And the next day, Cammie Murphy emails me and says, just thank me for meeting. Like, I just think that, like, this isn't it's sort of like a function of realizing you're not a consumer in a consumer society and that there's a person on the other end. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about students asking you about good and bad emails, to realize that you have a fucking hard, time-demanding job, and an email, asking someone to read an email is kind of asking for something, right?
Yeah. I think that, thank you goes a long way. I think we're so quick to criticize, and we're not quick enough to praise.
Right.
So,
I think that's the yogi in me starting to realize gratitude goes a long way.
Yeah, I think that that's important to say thank you. And they did their research too. They knew who we
cool.
were and our backgrounds. And I was like really impressed. I'm like, why do you know who I am and what I've been doing for the last 10 years?
That's cool.
So that was important. But yeah, I mean, something as simple as an email that your first impression is going to be that very first line of your email that I'm going to remember or I'm not going to remember.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. So can we switch gears a little? And Elizabeth, can I talk to you about the career and your job? So how does it feel now? Where do you live?
Queens.
Okay, so you're taking which train to work?
I take the 7 to the 1.
Okay, so how does it feel coming out of the 1? I guess you're at which Canal?
The Houston stop.
Houston stop. Coming up out of Houston stop 1. I should have done my homework. How does it feel walking to work now versus walking to work at the other jobs? And how is your consciousness affected by this stage of your career? And does the question make sense?
It does make sense. Coming out of the 1 now, if I'm running late, I know that I'm setting a bad example for my team.
Interesting.
Whereas when you don't run a team, if you're late, you're like, oh, my boss is going to notice that I'm late. Maybe she won't notice. Maybe she's in a meeting. But when you're the boss,
right? Maybe I leave my jacket downstairs, so I come in. It looks like I was in the building the whole time.
Totally. That being in charge of other people's lives and careers really gives you a sense of gravitas, and being a creative director has made me kind of want to be, might sound silly, but it makes me want to be a better person. It makes me want to...
Does not sound silly.
Yeah, like it makes me want... You have people looking at you, and maybe people want to be like you, or maybe they want to mimic your career path or something like that, but they believe in you. And by and large, my team signed up to work for me. Sam and Lauren signed up to work for me. Anna and Bailey work for me. I have to do right by them. And like if I screw up and I phone it in and I come in hungover or I'm late or whatever, like I'm not being the best person for them.
Was this a step on a stairway for you, or is this like a completely sort of sea change, different outlook to your life from the last place?
No, it was a gradual change.
That's good.
But I did feel like everything, all of the changes felt really gradual, like copywriter to senior copywriter to ACD. That's kind of a slow thing. Right. But then going to creative director, for some reason, that bump feels really,
the job
really
is really different, right?
The job's different. And the level of respect you get and the way people treat you is really different. Like all of a sudden you're at the grown-up table and you have to act like it. And people expect more of you. And you're earning a certain salary. And if you don't do your job well, people think you're a shithead, as they should.
What does that mean, grown up taste? So interesting you said that. I just finished editing, full disclosure about how this podcast works. I just yesterday finished editing the Karina Falusi episode, which came out 2 months ago or something. And she talked about how she went to a big network and had to be a grown up. And she had to act a certain way. Has that been something that that has been a conscious adjustment for you? Or is it something that like you just, I don't think that would be hard for you to do. I don't think that would be difficult for you to be like responsible and all that kind of stuff. It wouldn't weigh on you.
No, it hasn't been difficult. I enjoy leadership. I have always wanted this responsibility. For me, it was fulfilling.
What about giving up the work? What about when Lauren shows you lines? How do you feel about sort of not being the writer or on a project? Here's
the thing no one tells you about being a creative director that's fucking great is you still get credit for everything. Like that was
but you like writing.
I do. I love writing, and I still get to. Lauren goes on vacation. Guess who writes tweets? This girl.
That one.
But no, I love it. It's just it's very strange to be kind of embedded with like people like Carrie and people like my boss James, people on the management team who genuinely kind of value my opinion on the way the agencies run. That makes me feel really good. I do feel like a lot of responsibility, but it's that is. I feel like I'm an integral part of building the future of the agency right now. And that's not something I've had before.
No, I can tell. And to be as bold and egotistical as I could say that in a mentor role for you, to look at you in this position is a very different Elizabeth. Like it doesn't feel to me like you have a job. It feels to me like you have sort of more of an identity and a more important role. And I think that's exciting for me looking at you as your friend and mentor. So that's really cool.
The important thing about her being a creative director, that is probably the greatest thing about Elizabeth that's really hard to find in a creative, is that she's also business minded. Mm-hmm. So she's conscious of the business as well as the work that goes out. So she's not overburning on hours and like, you know, all those like nitty gritty things that is my responsibility to handle. Like she is very conscious of that. And that's important in a creative director. And I think that that's why you take that big step and that she's grown in that position.
Right. She has all the elements ready, but she remembered to preheat the oven. So
right.
Has that ever happened where it's like, oh crap, and while it's sitting there? So I didn't even mention this at the top. Should I have talked about that? So Elizabeth was also the Elizabeth on MasterChef who she didn't win the final. She made it to the final. And what did you learn from that, or what did you apply to that from your advertising career? How much of a overlap was there?
One big takeaway for me was the idea of leaning into the performativeness of what we do. Performativeness.
The performance.
Mm-hmm. It's pronounced performativeness.
Oh, performativeness, right.
Leaning into the performance of what we do.
Performativeness, I think, is a much better performed version of performance.
Yes. But you know, part of the reason why I stayed so long on the show, obviously it's television, right? Like, yes, I can cook, but I also knew what was expected of me. I knew what the producers wanted. I knew what the director wanted, and I gave them what they wanted. So, of course, I was being myself. I was being true to myself, but I was also
being a character.
I was also being a character. I was a caricature of myself, which is always easy for me. I did like acting. I was kind of a theater nerd in high school.
You pretty much are a caricature of yourself.
I'm pretty much a caricature of myself. But that's something that I think has helped me a lot in my career is I was telling somebody earlier today, I got into advertising for the drama. I got into it for the pitches. Weird. The pitches and the meetings and the standing up in front of people and talking and that kind of like...
Oh my God, that's crazy. I've never heard anybody say that.
I did.
Well, I've never heard anybody admit it.
Well, here I am.
Yeah.
And
that's really cool.
It is a performance. And a big piece of feedback I like to give to junior creatives who work for me, and another big learning experience for me was doing, I took a stand-up course, stand-up comedy.
Right.
Stand-up comedy and copywriting have a lot in common. you write things down and try to be funny, but the performance aspect was life-changing for me, learning how to capture someone's attention for 5 minutes and hit the jokes, hit the comedic timing.
Yeah, if you read scripts of stand-up, sometimes it's not nearly as funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
a
the
lot
delivery.
Of it, absolutely. But I think it's really interesting because, Carrie, you were just saying that she understands the business side of it. And I think this is so cool for me if I'd heard this when I was younger, to say that you can be very business-minded, but also be very, very sort of aware and into the drama side of it, the dramatic performance, entertaining. I don't want to say it's the entertaining side. So we talk about portfolios a lot. I said there's a lot of great content here, but it's not entertaining. It's not. You haven't really made me want to look at the work. It's like I have to work so hard to get to the good stuff that you're making me work too hard, and I think it's not fun. You're not talking necessarily about fun. Fun is sort of a subset of drama or whatever, but I'm talking about performance and entertainment. I think that's really interesting. Because a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people struggle with, like, they don't want to get up and they're nervous about getting up and talking in front of people or whatever. I think that's something you got to get over.
I'll interject here. Was chatting with Dave Hahn last night, and he was saying that he can look at someone's portfolio and tell how good of a writer or art director or designer they are, but he says when he sees them present, he can tell who's going to be a creative director in 10 years.
That's interesting.
And I feel like that's really important. I think the circus probably much more now than when I was here is really putting an emphasis on presentation.
Dave does that, and I think it's a great job.
Yeah, and I really saw that come through in the 8th quarter kids today. They were so much more confident than I ever was showing my book, just talking through their work. And that's a huge part of it.
It is, for sure. Let's switch gears back to the looking for the book part. Carrie, I love what you said in forum about, because I talked about this. Tell me if I'm teaching this properly. I have 2 questions for you. All right. One is, tell me if I'm teaching this properly. I tell the students this. I said, you can pretty much be guaranteed that whoever's looking at your book is going to look at your least favorite piece, and it may be the only thing they look at, and they may only look at one. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So how long do you spend on a portfolio generally?
Less than a minute.
Does it make any difference if you look at a portfolio that has a grid of 9 pieces or a grid of 6 or 4? Does that make any difference?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I couldn't even tell you if I look at a portfolio and visually, if I'm going to sit there and be like, oh, that person had 9 pieces of their work in there. And this person had 4.
For a younger person, it's not that important.
No.
Okay. What were you going to say?
But I'm going to click on the very top and very first one.
You're always clicking at the top left first.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then straight to the About Me.
And straight to the About Me.
Okay.
I have a slightly different perspective on the number of pieces. If I saw 4 pieces in a student book, I would think, did this person not spend long enough in ad school? Did they try to go it on their own? Did they skip? I really think anything less than 6, 7, or 8 pieces is kind of like, what have you been doing for 2 years?
I think the problem is that the first pass is the recruiter, and I'm going to send you my top 5 books. Like, I'm going to send the creative director my top 5 books. So the first pass, if it's going to be me, I get what you're saying, but then you're going to critique that part. And then we're going to throw out those 3 out of the 5. And then we're going to interview the 2 people.
All right. So this is a question for both of you, but primarily for Carrie. Through my experience of doing these podcasts, I'm finding a lot of great creatives are working in-house. A lot of great creatives are doing content places. The advertising industry is morphed into sort of a soup of different types of opportunities for young people. Is there an upside or a downside, or is there any significance to, if you're looking at maybe a mid-level hire of someone who's spent the first 3 or 4 years of their career client side, is that a good thing or a bad thing or neither? Or if they've worked in sort of a creative field that's not a traditional advertising field, what are the pluses and minuses of maybe starting off at a Facebook or an Apple versus going into an agency job first, and if they're looking for their second job?
I think if you're good at what you do, then you're going to be good anywhere. So I even equate it to recruiting. Like, I can recruit for a financial person, or I can recruit for a creative person. I think that, like, if you're a copywriter at an Apple or you're a copywriter at an ad agency, like, if you're a damn good copywriter, you could probably pick up and just be great anywhere. But the problem is that when you work for one of those big brands, and then I need a copywriter for an advertising agency, I don't know if I'm going to necessarily look for someone out of Facebook, because they might not fit in, not only culturally, but they just might not know about kind of the nuances of, like, project-based work, or like the quick-paced environment, or being able to, like, work on something for 2 weeks and then change brands and work on something else. So I mean, at Apple, it's just, I feel like it's probably more structured. So I'm going to get a different kind of background than what I would be looking for in terms of like what I would want in a copywriter for MRY specifically.
That's pretty interesting. One of the questions that came up at Forum, a lot of students kind of feel like that this is so important. This first job is so critical. Like, it's like, how important, is it a red flag to see a crappy agency first job in a portfolio? Is it a bonus that someone starts somewhere good, but maybe the portfolio isn't great? I'm talking a little bit about the first job decision. Does that make sense what I'm asking you? When you're looking at resumes?
Yeah. Well,
you go ahead. I know what I was going to say is like, for me, it's not super important where you've been. It's what you've done and who you are. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can go to Google and do shit.
Right.
And be a peon who gets nothing produced, right? Like, or you can work at a really crappy agency and turn a sowsier into a silk purse, as they say.
That's right.
So, I don't know. To me, the name on the door has never mattered. It's
agree.
What's in your book? Who are you? What are you going to bring?
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that we're just the type of industry where, like, you're going to bounce around, and advertising has a certain empathy towards that. Like, we get it. We get it's hard. We get, like, you were there for a year and you gutted it out on the hardest account and you left. Mm-hmm. I think other industries, like, if you leave somewhere within a year, they kind of frown upon that.
Right,
but I think our industry is a little bit different. So the first job, if you're there for a year and a half and you stick it out and then you want to leave, I don't necessarily weigh heavily on that.
I will say this, and this doesn't apply to just juniors, but this is, for me, a red flag when I'm hiring people who are maybe like mid-level or they've had a few jobs. If I look down someone's resume and they have left a bunch of full-time jobs after like 6 months, that to me is a red flag that they're either like a climber, which means like you're just leaving jobs to get a $5,000 or $3,000 raise each time, and the only thing that matters to you is getting a tiny raise bump and then you're out,
right?
Which is stupid. Or you're someone who doesn't have thick enough skin to tough it out when things get rough, which they inevitably will.
See, this is interesting because I think you hit something really important. I think that in our industry, if you've left after 6 months, it's because you quit. I don't think people get fired after 6 months.
No, you have to suck way longer.
So you're basically
you lose a really big client,
right? Exactly, but you're leaving. Someone's getting restless or isn't a team. Something's wrong with that person if it's that short of a time frame.
Yes.
Versus, because I think that sort of the people's assumption would be like they can't keep a job, they're getting fired. It's like I don't think agencies are going to fire you after 6 months. You're going to have a strong, stern talking to. Yeah. But you're not going to lose 3 jobs in a row after 6 months.
I also just think it's crazy to do that because it's really hard to get anything good produced in 6 months.
Impossible. You can't even get a lay of the political land and know the client well enough after that long. You can't speak the language that's going to get work sold until 9 months into a job.
Absolutely.
What is it about Sam and Lauren professionally that you keep talking about how much you love this team? Why?
Sam and Lauren, all the bad stuff that everyone says about millennials, like young millennials, they don't have any of that. They are not entitled. They don't have egos. They don't complain. If they ever even want to complain, they spend so much time apologizing to me that they're having a negative feeling about something that it doesn't even register as a complaint. Mm-hmm. Anything I do, any assignment I give them, they pretty much knock it out of the park. I don't really have to teach them that much. They kind of just came out of the circus knowing what to do, knowing how to do it. They have the right attitudes. They're the first ones in the office every day. Carrie is probably the first and they're probably the second. They're nice, they're likable, they're smart, they get it.
Every time you ask them to do something, they're like, well, how can I help and what can I do? There is never a question on why do I have to work on this? Or, I don't think I'm going to have time. They go the extra mile every single time, and that's a good creative.
Yeah, it's great.
There's a problem in the industry of people, and this is not just young people, this is people across all parts of their career, thinking that they're kind of above certain parts of their job, or it's above what it is, above what it is they do. You're not above anything. There's a reason why you get paid, because it's a fucking job. And it's like, if you're being paid and someone tells you to write a tweet, write the tweet. And write a really great tweet. Like, the fastest way to not have to do shit work anymore is to do amazing shit work. Because pretty soon, someone realizes, oh, they do a really good job at that shit project. We should give them better projects.
Right. Well, they're good. Let's give them something else that they can be good on.
Yeah. And people, I've never understood the approach to I know people who have this approach to their career where when it's like a less than desirable assignment, they phone it in and do a shitty job, and they wait for the plum assignments to really show what they can do. It's like, no, you should give 110% on the worst things so that you stop getting the worst things.
I forget what a worst thing. I guess I'm just too far removed from those kind of assignments to understand why something's bad. Is it bad?
Well, I think from like if like a designer is getting asked to resize something, they're like, "Why am I resizing this? I'm a senior designer. Just fucking resize it and shut the hell up and and do it." You know, I mean, like
this needs to be resized.
It's that. I'm not going to ask like our account person to do it. You know, you're the go-to person.
That's interesting. So again, switching gears. So let's talk about your classmates and friends. Are you still rooting for one another from afar? So you guys have been out for 11 years, right?
Yeah.
So. Talk about the relationship. Do you guys get together to see each other, talk? Do you follow your peers that you went to school with? How many of you are still in the business, like at agencies?
Most of us are still in the business. We absolutely still cheer for each other. It's so fun to get together with people. And it's a fun time in our lives where we've all kind of gotten to the point where most of us are ACDs or creative directors. But you still get so excited, like when you get together and have beers with your friends and you're like, hey, you guys, like I got a raise this week. And you're like, yeah. Or like, you guys, I'm a fucking creative director now. Like I got promoted. Like that never stops being exciting. And it's just awesome to see like where everybody is now. I mean, everybody in my quarter is like pretty successful. So
that's great.
It's exciting to.
Are you successful?
I'm successful by my own measure.
Yeah, that's great. That's important.
I wanted to be a creative director in New York, and that's what I am.
That's perfect. Okay, so I didn't realize that you were visiting New York with a job and ended up getting... This is an interesting story. I want you to tell the story again because I didn't know this story about how you ended up moving from Chicago to New York.
Yeah. So when I was working in Chicago, my partner and I were sent on a sort of minor client task. Like we were sent to New York to do basically a presentation. So we flew in on a Wednesday. The presentation was on a Thursday, and we decided to extend our trip and stay the weekend to visit our friend who lived there. And we went to meet her for lunch. We met her at her agency, and we essentially walked out with a job because we were sort of called out instantly as being an art director copy team. I don't know how, I mean, I think recruiters know these things.
First of all, this is crazy that you're in this office visiting a friend and like you ended up going for an interview that day because they needed someone so badly and you were literally just a warm body in the building? Or did they know did they know your work or anything? No,
that is 100% what happened. They were so desperate to hire people. They had just won a bunch of new Verizon business. Right. They had no one to do it. The recruiter was desperate to find freelancers, anyone, warm bodies to come do this work. She saw us, asked if we were creatives. It so happened that we were. I think she thought that because she knew we were friends with the girl we were visiting. Right. So she sort of assumed we were all creatives, which we were. And she said, can you interview this afternoon with our creative directors? And we kind of pulled up some of our work that we had been working on. We weren't particularly proud of it. We wanted to leave that agency because we weren't doing work that we loved. We wanted the opportunity to do something better. I mean, the guy who interviewed us, who I work for now, basically said, your work's not good.
Oh, but interesting.
But he said, I have a feeling that you guys are better than your book. And we said, we absolutely are.
That's great.
And he said, I'll give you 2 weeks to work here and prove that you're better than what I see here. And if you are, you can stay.
That's amazing.
And we did.
And, well, you didn't just stay. You, like, moved to New York and slept on sofas. So this is the part that I think you're leaving out. It's like it wasn't even a job.
Yeah, no. He offered us two weeks of freelance right before Christmas.
With no promise of anything in January.
No.
Right, takes some balls.
Yes. I would say within the first 3 or 4 days, he knew he wanted us to come back. And you have to understand, I mean, we had really risked so much. We both had boyfriends that we left back in Chicago that we were just hoping would like move to New York with us at some point.
Was your boyfriend working in Chicago?
He was. Yeah. He had a job that he loved.
Oh my God.
He's never forgiven me. All these years later. Yeah.
Mine's never forgiven me for moving to Atlanta. She's never forgiven me for that either. So
you can be married to someone that never forgives you for things. It's true.
Evidently, that's true.
Yeah, no, it was great. But I mean, we had so much to prove because of how much we were leaving behind. We really couldn't fuck it up. And so we poured everything we had into it.
Do you think that this is all because you kind of knew what you wanted, or is this because an opportunity came up to get out of where you were? Do you understand the question? Like, were you going for something that you had a vision of being? You wanted to be in New York, or was this sort of like, this is better than where I am?
We had a vision. We knew that we both wanted to go to New York at some point. We just didn't realize how soon the opportunity would present itself. I know I would have ended up there at some point, no matter what. But I just figured, why wait? Like, this is just jump.
Another thing I want to talk about your early career. So I remember, I think that you must have been at BB, you must have been in Energy, but it may have been Digitas, where you were writing lines for some gum. What was that? Wrigley. So can you talk about just the job of a copywriter sometimes?
Yes. I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but the thing that I remember writing the most headlines for was, and again, this is Chicago, on I-90. Is that it's called the Dan something expressway, the Dan Ryan expressway or something.
Okay, maybe
I don't know
Chicagoans, let me know.
It's a big road. Wrigley has owned for many, many years a digital out-of-home.
This is the story.
Board. This is the story because this was months and months and months of my life. So they owned this digital out-of-home board, and it was reserved exclusively for Wrigley products and mostly for Orbit gum. So whenever Orbit would come out with a new flavor, like Hawaiian Punch or fucking mint chocolate or whatever their like new flavor of the month was, it was my job to write like 50 headlines for this out-of-home board because it runs 24/7, right? Every 5 seconds they're changing to a headline. So I would have to write like 150 headlines to get 50 that I didn't hate too much to show my creative director to narrow down, and he would narrow it down to like 20.
150 lines about the chocolate mint
gum.
Right.
One flavor of gum. So they would have one flavor that would be up for about 6 months. So for 6 months, I would have to write 20, like just so many headlines. Like they change them all the time. I mean, at a certain point, you feel like there's not any more jokes.
There's no language left in the world.
There aren't any more words left to talk about Hawaiian Punch gum. Yet it is your job to think of more.
I remember you saying something like 700 headlines or something.
So many.
About. That's insane. And like, this is the thing that I think people don't get in school. They think that like everything's a rebrand and everything's approved. I thought of this whole way of selling BP gas. It's like, wow, that's great. Let's make it. Guess how much that happens in the real world?
Never.
3 times in 30 years.
Yep.
It's the once in a decade. It's like the perfect storm that you get to actually do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be downer or cynical. I'm just trying to be realistic about the fact, first of all, number one, you better fucking show that you can write the hell out of some gum. And 2, I don't know what that guitar sound is. And 3, or C, am I on C? Like, you have to prove yourself by writing those kind of things. That's what your job is going to be. Back to resizing the banner ad. All right, so question for both of you that I've never asked on the podcast to anyone, because I'm struggling with this as an instructor. What is the future of advertising? Is the future of advertising social? Is it content? Is it client side? Is it platforms creating their own creative, like Google and Facebook? Is it what? Just make it simple through the lens of Hulu. How do you reach people? What's the medium and what's the message? And it's a huge question, but your gut right now. What kind of stuff are y'all making, and what do you see in the next year?
Can I go? I think that the future is making things that people seek out, because every day there's some new way to turn off advertising. So you have to make things people want to seek out, because they're going to be coming to you because you're not going to be able to get to them. It could be a thing. It could be a video. It could be a film. It could be a pair of shoes. It could be a product. It could be a movie. DirecTV. Because I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan now, I listen to a podcast called Binge Mode, which was a partnership where DirecTV partnered with The Ringer, which is an entertainment blog, to create a podcast where they go through and they talk about every episode of Game of Thrones, one podcast episode per an episode of Game of Thrones. That's an amazing
Right. I was just talking about that in class yesterday. Somebody had something for season 2 of Stranger Things. And I was like, you don't have anything here that I want to come back for. Like, you have to have something in these where you have embedded plot twists, or you have basically maybe you have the trunk of the show is the plot, but maybe you're giving me some branches of backstory, side story stuff, kind of like Rogue One. Do you remember the movie Rogue One, the Star Wars, which is like a backstory? So you got to give me content that enhances that experience. Is that what you're talking about? That kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, or just like you just have to make things that people go and find.
Right.
Because you can't get to them. I
that's
never see commercials anymore.
Right,
because I don't have cable. I pay for ad-free Hulu. I pay for ad-free Netflix. Well, Netflix doesn't have ads, but I pay for Netflix. I have HBO. Like, I don't... And what do you think I do when it's like skip ad on YouTube? I fucking skip the ad. Like, I'm a human being. I mean, I don't listen to the radio. I don't drive a car.
Right.
So it's like, I don't hear... Like, I never hear ads. It's crazy. And that's my literal job.
How do you know what to buy?
Yeah, it's hard.
That's really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Do you see ad? Do you find stuff? Do you seek out brand experiences of any kind? Do you watch videos? Are people forwarding you things that aren't advertising friends showing you the shit they just made? Like, do you ever see ads?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Like, well, I watch one live show a week, which is The Bachelor or Bachelorette.
Okay.
I watch it live on my ABC app on my Apple TV, so then I'm fed commercials. So once a week I do see TV commercials. Of course, I see stuff my friends post on Facebook. And, I mean, obviously we're in the industry, so we have people... we have Slack, which is like an internal thing.
Right.
We have people sharing things there. Oh, I saw this. It's interesting. I check Ad Week. Yeah, I do my homework. I'm not an idiot. But, like, as a human being, as a consumer...
That's what I'm talking about.
I don't... Right. I see out of home because I walk around New York. I see stuff on the subway, stuff like that.
Interesting. So it's all about making stuff people want.
I think.
Interesting.
And unique, right?
Yeah.
I don't want a client to say that we can do that. Why do we need you?
Yeah.
You know, that's the scary thing for me. Is that I feel like the huge clients of the world are like, all right, you did this experiential event for us, but we could just hire a production company and we already know what design we want to use and we already have capabilities in-house that could probably do this. Like, show me what you have to offer that I can't do for myself.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. I don't know if I asked you this, but I'm going to ask both of you this question, knowing what you know now. If you could go back to the day you graduated from the circus 11 years ago, what would you whisper in young Elizabeth's ear? It's coming your way, Carrie.
I guess I would... Oh my God, what would I tell myself?
What have you learned that you wish you'd known?
What have I learned that I wish I'd known? That's really hard. You go.
Put me on the spot. For Elizabeth's ear or just in
your
general?
ear?
Oh, man, you.
Oh, wow, it's been 20 years. I don't remember. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. I think like you'll kind of find your way. I wish I didn't stay at a couple jobs that I just stayed at because I was kind of scared to explore the unknown. Take a risk. I think that you've obviously done that before.
Yeah, that's good. That's good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would say to myself, take a breath. It's okay to not constantly be producing work every second. Like, I especially think when you're young, it's like you are so terrified that you're not going to get anything for your book out of a job.
That's good, though, I think. But okay. I don't want to tell you you're wrong for your answer because I think that's a good answer. But it's interesting.
But you will.
So interesting. I ask this question every episode, and I think people have such a different view of themselves in the past. Like, it's like being mature, you realize the value of breathing. I'm not sure if you're breathing then it's as valuable as you think it is now because you're so much better now than you were.
Right.
So you can actually breathe and get great stuff done.
Right.
So I don't know.
Okay, I have a different answer now.
Okay, good. I thought maybe I would shake something loose.
You shake something out. I would tell myself, like, you can actually do this. You know how to do this. I struggle with so much self-doubt. I mean, even now, oh my God, all the time. Every time I get briefed, I'm like, well, this is fucking it. This is the brief that I'm not going to be able to crack. I don't know what to do. I'm not going to be able to make an ad. It's not going to come.
I've never felt that before. That's a problem that I have. Really? You still think that?
Every time. Yeah. I don't necessarily want to put it on a gender thing, but I do feel like there's they wrote a whole book called The Confidence Gap.
Yeah. About
men and women. Can I just tell a thing that I read this morning that's batting around my head that's like fucking me up? A group of researchers asked a group of men and women, I think they were kind of like chosen at random for this thing that they were researching, is there anyone in the room who is an expert on breastfeeding? No one raised their hand except one of the men, and they said, oh, how are you an expert on breastfeeding? You know, are you an OBGYN? Are you a doctor or whatever? And he said, oh, no, I just watched my wife breastfeed for 3 months. She just got done with it. I consider myself an expert.
I stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night.
You sure did.
Bunch of bullshit.
So women who had breastfed did not raise their hands that they were experts, but someone who'd watched his wife do it self-identified as an expert.
Absolutely getting your point.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily why. I do think there is a difference. Like I see a lot of like young men who confidently stride into rooms and present shit ideas. And I see young women who have great ideas who are terrified to speak. Mm-hmm. And I wish it weren't like that, but I do think it is a truth, and I do know that I personally struggle with that. Have you ever seen my favorite tote bag of life? Carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man.
No, that's great.
I look in the mirror every morning and I say to myself,
God, that's really interesting. Are we all just products of our childhood? And it's like it's all how we were wired when they were assembling us. Mm-hmm. So
no, we're fucked. I only respond to negative criticism because my parents were super critical of me. Like I hate when people compliment me. I'm like, ooh, ooh.
Oh, I don't hate it. I just don't hear it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What, didn't you just hear me say? You did? I didn't know. I did not hear you say the good thing. Yeah. And you know what else I realized as a teacher? It's so fucked up. If I say something good about a student in class, the other students take it as if it's a point off of them. Mm-hmm. Isn't it? Oh.
There is enough...
We're complicated animals. How do we even exist? We may not for long.
Oh, we're dead. We're done.
Oh, my God. Well, thank you guys for talking. I don't know if this made any sense to anyone, but I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it, too.
So you guys can find the podcast. You can find the agency at MRY.com. You can find the podcast homepage on Facebook at facebook.com/DGMS podcast. Also, every episode is on balserville.com. It's like my last name with a city at the end, balserville.com. Also at the iTunes store. As you know, somehow you found this episode. You obviously know how to find it. You can reach Elizabeth at Elizabeth V. Stevens, spelled with a P, Elizabeth V. Stevens at Gmail. That is the free Google Mail service, which she's been using for years. You can also find her on the Twitter at Elizabeth Cauvel. Carrie is reachable via electronic mail, correspondence at carrie.cervati@mry.com, carrie.cervati@mry.com. If you send her an email, make it personal. Do your homework. Do not copy and paste for another email that you send to another recruiter. Be respectful of her time. Do not send a link and say, let me know what you think. Ask a specific pointed question. Please be curt and respectful. Do not waste her time. She looks at 50 books a day. She doesn't have time to fucking read your novel that you are sending because it costs you nothing to send this long email. It costs her a minute to read it. Please be respectful of Carrie's time. You're much more likely to get a response. You can reach me, as always, at danspodcast@mac.com. Until next time, thank you for listening. Ladies, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
This was fun. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.